The story of Rome begins not with certainty, but with a blend of myth, legend, and fragments of history. According to Roman tradition, twin brothers Romulus and Remus were born to a Vestal virgin, Rhea Silvia, and the god Mars, a jealous king. Fearing these divine heirs, ordered them drowned in the Tiber River. Instead, the river carried them downstream to the place that would later become Rome. There, a she-wolf discovered the infants and nursed them until a shepherd Faustulus found and raised them as his own. As they grew, the brothers learned of their royal lineage and chose to build a settlement where they had been saved. But conflict arose between them, and in a defining moment, Romulus killed Remus and became the sole founder of the city. On the Palatine Hill, he marked the boundaries of Rome with a plow in the year 753 BCE, a date Romans later used as the beginning of their history. At first, the settlement was only a cluster of thatched huts by the Tiber, overshadowed by stronger Etruscan cities to the north and Greek colonies to the south. To strengthen his small community, Romulus welcomed outlaws, exiles, and refugees from nearby regions. This soon created a shortage of women, which Romulus addressed through the episode known as the abduction of the Sabine women. He invited the Sabines to a festival and then seized their daughters as brides for Roman men. For nearly 2.5 centuries after Romulus, Rome was ruled by kings 7 in total, who guided the city's growth from a village to a regional power. Romulus was followed by Numa Pompilius, remembered as a wise ruler who established many of Rome's religious traditions. He created the office of Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest, and founded the Temple of Janus, whose doors would close only in times of peace, a rarity in Roman history. The third king, Tullus Hostilius, expanded Rome through war with the neighboring city of Alba Longa. Under his rule, Rome absorbed the Alban population, setting a pattern of assimilation that would define Rome's growth. The legendary combat between the Horatii and the Curiatii triplets, representing Rome and Alba Longa, also dates to this period, symbolically deciding the fate of both cities. The fourth king, Pancus Marcius, built Rome's first bridge across the Tiber and founded the port of Ostia at the river's mouth, opening trade routes to the Mediterranean. He also expanded the city's defenses by including the Janiculum Hill within its boundaries. With the fifth king, Tarquinius Priscus, Etruscan influence grew. He began construction of the great Temple of Jupiter on the Capitoline Hill and the Circus Maximus for chariot races. His reign also saw the start of the Cloaca Maxima, a massive drainage system that transformed swampy land into what became the Roman Forum. Servius Tullius, the sixth king, introduced Rome's first constitution, dividing citizens into classes by wealth and military role. This organization, called the Centuriate Assembly, remained central to Roman politics and the army for centuries. Servius also built the first defensive wall encircling all 7 hills of Rome: Palatine, Aventine, Capitoline, Quirinal, Viminal, Esquiline, and Celian. The final king, Tarquinius Superbus, known as Tarquin the Proud, ruled as a tyrant. Though his reign included major building projects, including the completion of the Temple of Jupiter, his arrogance and cruelty alienated Rome's nobility. The turning point came when his son, Sextus Tarquinius, assaulted Lucretia, a respected noblewoman. Outrage over this act led to a revolt led by Lucius Junius Brutus and Lucretia's husband Collatinus. In 509 BCE, the monarchy was overthrown, and the Roman Republic was established. This new system of government, designed to prevent power from concentrating in one ruler, shaped not only Rome's future, but also influenced political thought for centuries. Looking back, Rome's early history shows how its beginnings shaped its character. From the start, Rome absorbed influences from the Etruscans and Greeks while building its own identity. Early Romans emphasized military discipline, practical engineering, and legal order principles that became the foundations of their empire. What began as a small village across the 7 hills grew into one of central Italy's largest cities, with perhaps 35,000 residents by the end of the monarchy. Roman society at this stage was centered on the family, with the male head of household holding broad authority. Religious rituals were considered vital, as Romans believed proper practice maintained pax deorum, peace with the gods, essential. For prosperity. As you drift toward rest, picture these early Romans farmers, warriors, priests, and craftsmen laying the foundation for the eternal city. From its modest beginnings on the Tiber, Rome would one day stretch across 3 continents and form an empire unlike any before it. But at this moment, with the monarchy ended, Rome stood at the threshold of its republic, ready to follow a path that would secure its lasting place in history. Rome entered exile, and its people stood at the dawn of a new age. The monarchy that had guided the city's early rise was gone, replaced by a daring system of governance that would shape Rome for the next 5 centuries. This new republic was built to prevent the concentration of power that had produced tyranny. Under Tarquinius Superbus, 2 annually elected magistrates, called consuls, replaced the king. Each could veto the other's decisions, ensuring no single figure could dominate Roman politics. Behind the consuls stood the Senate, a council of elders drawn from noble families. Though lacking formal legislative authority, its influence was considerable. Yet from its beginning, the Republic faced dangers. The exiled king sought allies among nearby cities, while the powerful Etruscan lord Lars Porsena besieged Rome. According to legend, the Roman hero Horatius Cocles held a bridge against the Etruscan armies single-handedly, while comrades destroyed it behind him, saving the city from capture. Rome's internal struggles proved as difficult as its foreign threats. At first, the Republic was dominated by patricians, hereditary nobles, who controlled both politics and religion. Most citizens, known as plebeians, were excluded from power and often trapped in debt to patrician landowners. This social divide shaped Roman politics for centuries. The first major crisis came when plebeian soldiers, Rome's military backbone, withdrew to the Sacred Mount in history's first recorded general strike. Their action forced patricians to create the office of tribune of the plebs, magistrates who could veto harmful legislation. Tribunes were declared sacrosanct, and anyone who harmed them faced religious condemnation and death. Another key step was the creation of the 12 Tables, Rome's first written code of laws. Posted publicly in the Forum, they replaced secretive procedures once controlled by patricians. Though still favoring the elite in many ways, the code marked an important step toward legal equality and established the principle that laws must be public knowledge. As Rome managed these domestic challenges, it gradually expanded across central Italy. The city fought frequent wars against neighbors, the Volsa, Aqui, Sabines, and most notably the Etruscans. The capture of the wealthy city of Veii, just 12 miles north, doubled Rome's territory. But disaster struck when Celtic Gauls defeated Roman forces at the river Allia and sacked Rome. Most of the city was destroyed, though defenders held out on the Capitoline Hill. Legend says sacred geese in Juno's temple warned of a night assault. Saving the citadel, the Gauls eventually withdrew after receiving a ransom of gold, but the memory of the sack haunted Rome for generations. Remarkably, Rome recovered quickly. The city was rebuilt, stronger walls erected, and within decades, Rome defeated the Latin League, integrating related peoples into its state. Some Latin communities gained full Roman citizenship, others partial rights. This system of graded citizenship became a cornerstone of Roman governance. The Middle Republic brought important political reforms. The Licinian Sextian laws required that one consul be a plebeian, opening the highest office to non-nobles. Over time, plebeians gained access to all magistracies and religious posts, with wealth rather than birth increasingly defining opportunity. This integration helped Rome avoid the destructive class struggles common in Greek city-states. Rome's rising power led to new conflicts. After 3 long wars with the mountain peoples of central Italy, the Samnites, Rome extended control across the peninsula. Contact with the Greek cities of Magna Graecia followed. The city of Tarentum, threatened by Roman expansion, sought aid from King Pyrrhus of Epirus. Pyrrhus arrived with a strong army and war elephants, previously unknown to Romans. Though he won several battles, his heavy losses produced only Pyrrhic victories. After a failed Sicilian campaign, he returned to Greece, leaving the Greeks to face Rome alone. Soon after, Tarentum fell, and Rome dominated all of Italy south of the Po River. Rome governed this Italian confederation with notable skill, while keeping firm control over foreign policy and military matters. It allowed allies significant local autonomy. Extensions of citizenship created loyalty, while colonies provided land for veterans and military outposts for defense. This alliance system gave Rome manpower and resources unmatched in the Mediterranean, a full, decisive advantage in future wars. Rome's expansion soon drew it into Sicily, where Carthage, a major North African maritime power, held the west. When mercenaries called Naretines appealed for Roman help against Syracuse and Carthage, the Senate faced a pivotal choice. Intervention meant war with Carthage. Accepting the appeal triggered the First Punic War. Rome, inexperienced at sea, built a navy by copying a captured Carthaginian ship and equipping vessels with the corvus, a boarding bridge that turned sea battles into infantry fights. Despite severe losses, Rome's persistence paid off. Carthage surrendered Sicily and paid a heavy indemnity. The Second Punic War pushed Rome to the brink. The Carthaginian general Hannibal Barca led an army including elephants across the Alps into Italy. He destroyed Roman forces at Trebia, Lake Trasimene, and Cannae, where nearly 50,000 Romans fell in a single day. Yet Rome refused to yield. Quintus Fabius Maximus adopted delaying tactics, while Scipio carried the war into Spain and Africa. When Hannibal was recalled to defend Carthage, Scipio defeated him at Zama. Carthage lost its navy, its empire, and its independence. Rome, now dominant in the west, turned east. Its legions defeated King Philip V of Macedon and Antiochus III of the Seleucid Empire. Macedonia was divided into 4 republics under Roman supervision, while Greece eventually fell under direct Roman control. Meanwhile, the Third Punic War ended with Carthage's destruction. These conquests transformed Rome. Wealth poured in, enriching the treasury and private citizens alike. War captives supplied abundant slaves, changing agriculture as small farms gave way to vast estates. Displaced farmers crowded into Rome, fueling social tension. The Republic, designed for a small city-state, now struggled to manage an empire. Provincial governors often exploited their posts, and generals with loyal armies posed challenges to civilian rule. The traditional Roman values of duty and restraint weakened as luxury and ambition grew. This instability shaped the Republic's final century. Tribune Tiberius Gracchus proposed land reforms to aid the poor, but opposition from elites led to his murder, the first political assassination in centuries. His brother Gaius Gracchus met a similar fate after pushing broader reforms, including grain subsidies. Violence had entered Roman politics. Ambitious generals soon exploited this turmoil. Marius and Sulla used their armies in political disputes. Sulla's march on Rome marked the first time a general attacked the city itself. Victorious, he made himself dictator and issued proscriptions lists of enemies to be executed and their property seized. Though he eventually retired, the precedent was dangerous. Later, Pompey, Crassus, and Julius Caesar formed the first triumvirate to dominate politics. Caesar's campaigns in Gaul made him wealthy, skilled, and popular. When ordered to surrender his command, he crossed the Rubicon River, declaring, "The die is cast." Civil war followed. Caesar defeated Pompey, became dictator, and introduced reforms, including a new calendar. His growing power alarmed senators, and on the Ides of March, he was assassinated. Instead of restoring the Republic, his death sparked more conflict. Octavian, Antony, and Lepidus formed the Second Triumvirate, defeating Caesar's assassins at Philippi. The alliance fractured, with Octavian in the west and Antony in the east, allied with Cleopatra of Egypt. At Actium, Octavian's forces defeated their fleet. Antony and Cleopatra fled to Egypt and later committed suicide. Octavian emerged as Rome's sole ruler. Careful to avoid Caesar's mistakes, he preserved republican appearances, calling himself princeps or first citizen, while holding absolute authority. Rome had entered a new phase, the Age of Empire. The Senate granted him the title Augustus, marking the true end of the Republic and the rise of the Roman Empire. The Republic's legacy was complex. Its system of constitutional balance ultimately failed to stop civil wars and the rise of dictatorship. Yet across 5 centuries, Rome had transformed from a small Italian city-state into the dominant power of the Mediterranean. Though emperors would preserve republican institutions in name only, the ideals of liberty, civic responsibility, and constitutional order would continue to shape Western political thought for thousands of years. It was in this moment that Octavian stood before the Senate. In January of 27 BCE, Rome stood at a turning point. The Republic, which had governed for nearly 5 centuries, had collapsed after years of civil war. Yet instead of declaring himself monarch, Octavian chose a more cautious path. He announced the return of power to the Senate and people of Rome, appearing to surrender the extraordinary authority he had gathered. The Senate, dominated by his allies, responded by granting him the name Augustus, a title with sacred meaning, suggesting one who is honored. They also provided him with a carefully designed set of powers: command over key provinces where the legions were based, tribunician authority, allowing him to veto decisions, and several other privileges. This moment marked the beginning of what historians call the Principate, a system where Augustus ruled as first citizen rather than king, preserving the appearance of republican government while exercising unmatched personal power. Augustus reigned for 41 years, setting models that defined imperial rule for centuries. He reduced the army from 60 legions to 28, settling veterans in colonies across Italy and the provinces. He restructured taxation, created a postal service, established firefighting units, and organized a permanent police force in Rome. His building projects reshaped the city so dramatically that he later claimed he had found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble. In foreign affairs, Augustus secured and expanded Roman borders. Germanic tribes were pushed beyond the Rhine, and Rome's eastern frontier was stabilized through diplomacy with the Parthian Empire. In Spain, long-standing resistance was finally crushed, and the Danube became Rome's northern boundary in Europe. Perhaps most importantly, Augustus created a reliable system of succession, something the late Republic had failed to achieve. With no son of his own, he gradually advanced his stepson Tiberius to prominence, ensuring a smooth transfer of power. Tiberius, a skilled general but hesitant ruler, founded the Julio-Claudian dynasty, which would govern Rome for over 50 years. His reign began effectively, but turned darker after he withdrew to Capri, leaving much authority in the hands of his ambitious Praetorian prefect, Sejanus. When Sejanus' plot to seize power was uncovered, Tiberius launched treason trials that spread fear throughout the aristocracy. He was succeeded by his grandnephew Caligula. At first, Caligula showed promise. but his rule soon descended into erratic behavior. Tales of extravagance, cruelty, and eccentric acts, such as plans to make his horse a consul, may have been exaggerated, but his assassination after only 4 years showed how unpopular he had become with Rome's elite. The Praetorian Guard then raised Claudius to the throne. Despite physical challenges that had kept him in the background, Claudius proved a capable administrator. During his 13-year reign, he expanded the empire by conquering Britain and adding new provinces in the east. He broadened citizenship rights and even allowed Gauls into the Senate, recognizing that Rome's strength lay in provincial integration, not Catalian dominance. The dynasty ended with Nero, guided at first by the philosopher Seneca and the Praetorian prefect Burrus. Nero began well, but soon turned tyrannical. He ordered the murder of his mother Agrippina, killed his wife, and persecuted Christians after the Great Fire of Rome. His growing unpopularity sparked revolts, and he ultimately committed suicide, allegedly declaring, "What an artist dies in me." Nero's death brought chaos known as the Year of the Four Emperors. In quick succession, Galba, Otho, and Vitellius claimed the throne, only to be overthrown by military uprisings. Stability returned when Vespasian, commander of the Eastern legions, emerged victorious and founded the Flavian dynasty. Vespasian, of modest origins, reigned for 10 years and restored order with a practical style of governance. He repaired Rome's finances and began construction of the Flavian amphitheater known today as the Colosseum on the site of Nero's palace, as a gift to the people. His son Titus succeeded him, but his short 2-year reign was marked by disasters, the eruption of Mount Vesuvius and a fire in Rome. Titus managed these crises with compassion and was deeply mourned at his death. The final Flavian ruler, Domitian, reigned for 15 years. Though he strengthened defenses along the Danube and in Britain, and was an efficient administrator, his authoritarian style alienated the Senate. His assassination ended the dynasty. The Senate then appointed Nerva, an elderly member of their ranks, as emperor. Without heirs or strong military backing, Nerva adopted the respected General Trajan as successor, establishing a model of adoptive succession that served Rome well for nearly a century. Trajan, the first emperor born outside Italy, ruled for 19 years and expanded Rome to its greatest territorial size. He conquered Dacia, modern Romania, adding its gold mines to the empire, and launched campaigns in Armenia, Mesopotamia, and parts of Parthia, briefly extending Rome to the Persian Gulf. Though later abandoned, these campaigns marked the height of Roman expansion. Trajan was also admired for domestic achievements. His vast building projects, the creation of a welfare program for poor children in Italy, and his reputation as an ideal ruler. On his deathbed, Trajan is said to have adopted Hadrian, though some suspected the decision was arranged after his death. Either way, Hadrian became emperor and shifted focus from expansion to consolidation. Recognizing the limits of empire, he abandoned Trajan's eastern conquests and concentrated on strengthening borders. He traveled widely across the provinces, often alongside his soldiers. In Britain, he ordered the construction of Hadrian's Wall, a massive frontier barrier that partly survives today. Similar fortifications appeared throughout the empire. Hadrian, a great admirer of Greek culture, spent much time in Athens and completed the long-delayed Temple of Olympian Zeus. His architectural contributions in Rome included the Pantheon, with its revolutionary concrete dome, which still stands as a marvel of Roman engineering. Hadrian chose Antoninus Pius as his successor, beginning a reign of 23 peaceful years. With no major wars or disturbances, the empire flourished. Continuing the tradition of adoption, Antoninus selected Marcus Aurelius as heir, with the condition that he also adopt Lucius Verus as co-emperor. Marcus Aurelius, remembered as a devoted, Stoic philosopher, faced a reign overshadowed by war. Germanic tribes, likely displaced by deeper migrations in Europe and Asia, pressed heavily on Rome's northern borders. Marcus and Lucius ruled jointly at first, but after Lucius' death, Marcus bore the burden alone. His reign was further troubled by the Antonine Plague, probably smallpox, which killed millions and weakened the empire's economy and military. Despite these difficulties, Marcus maintained Rome's frontiers and even planned new provinces beyond the Danube before his death. Unlike earlier emperors, who chose successors by adoption, Marcus allowed his biological son Commodus to inherit power, a decision that would prove disastrous. Looking back on the 2 centuries from Augustus to Marcus Aurelius, this period represents the height of the Roman Empire. The population may have reached 70 million, living under the stability of the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. A vast network of roads over 250,000 miles long supported trade, communication, and military movement across the Mediterranean and beyond. Cities thrived, equipped with aqueducts, public baths, theaters, and forums. Roman law grew more sophisticated and humane. Literature and art flourished, and works by Virgil, Ovid, Tacitus, Suetonius, and Pliny the Younger left lasting influence. Christianity also emerged during this era. Jesus of Nazareth lived under Tiberius, and though Christians faced periodic persecution, communities spread across the empire. By Marcus' time, Christian groups existed in nearly all major cities, laying the groundwork for future transformation of the empire. The provinces also grew in importance as emperors from Spain and beyond took power and citizenship spread more broadly, eventually extending to nearly all free inhabitants. Trade connected Rome with distant regions, bringing goods from India and China. This remarkable era rested on 4 pillars: Augustus' settlement balancing imperial power with tradition, the adoption system that produced skilled rulers secure, frontiers, and an economy strong enough to support urban life, and a standing army of nearly 400,000 soldiers. When Marcus Aurelius died on the Danube frontier, few could imagine the Golden Age was ending. His son Commodus' accession marked the beginning of new crises that would test Rome's resilience. Yet the achievements of this early empire left a model of peace, prosperity, and governance that continued to inspire civilizations long after Rome itself had faded. The golden age of the Roman Empire began to fade when Commodus took the throne. After the death of Marcus Aurelius, unlike his wise and philosophical father, Commodus showed little interest in the responsibilities of ruling. Handsome and athletic, he favored the gladiatorial arena over the council chambers. He often performed in staged combats, charging the imperial treasury enormous sums for his appearances and boasting of countless victories against opponents forbidden to defeat him. While Commodus pursued his fantasies, renaming Rome Colonia, Commodiana, and presenting himself as a new Hercules, the empire continued to function largely thanks to experienced administrators. However, his arbitrary executions of senators and officials spread fear across Rome. On the last day of the year, he was strangled in his bath by his wrestling partner, Narcissus, as part of a conspiracy within his inner circle, who feared they might soon be the next victims. After Commodus' assassination, the Senate raised the respected General Pertinax to the throne. His efforts to restore discipline within the Praetorian Guard quickly proved fatal. When he refused their demands for a special bonus, they murdered him after only 3 months in power. What followed was one of Rome's most disgraceful moments. The Praetorians auctioned the imperial throne to the highest bidder. The wealthy senator Didius Julianus secured this dishonorable prize, but his reign lasted just 66 days. Outraged by events in Rome, provincial armies put forward their own generals as candidates for emperor. From this turmoil emerged Septimius Severus, commander of the Pannonian legions. He marched on Rome, disbanded the discredited Praetorians, and founded a new dynasty. Severus was a capable soldier who secured power through battlefield success and ruthless elimination of rivals. Born in Leptis Magna in North Africa, he became the first emperor from that continent and spoke Latin with a distinct accent. His reign marked significant shifts in Roman governance, especially the growing militarization of administration and a stronger reliance on equestrians over senators for key posts. Over his 18-year rule, Severus launched successful eastern campaigns against the Parthians, creating the new province of Mesopotamia with its fertile farmlands. He also traveled to Britain, reinforcing Hadrian's Wall and campaigning against the Caledonians. It was there, in the northern outpost of Ebracum, modern York, that he died, reportedly advising his sons to enrich the soldiers and disregard everyone else. Those sons, Caracalla and Geta, were intended to rule jointly, but their hatred made cooperation impossible. Within a year, Caracalla had his brother murdered in their mother's arms and ordered a damnatio memoria, erasing Geta from records and monuments. Caracalla then unleashed a reign of terror against his brother's supporters. Yet, despite his cruelty, he enacted one of Rome's most important laws, the Constitutio Antoniniana, which granted citizenship to all free men in the empire. Though partly driven by the desire to increase tax revenues, this decree transformed Rome from a city-state into a universal empire, where citizenship was defined by law rather than ethnicity. Caracalla's reign ended when he was assassinated by a soldier. While on campaign in the east, the Severan dynasty continued through a series of rulers tied together by remarkable women of the family, especially Julia Maesa, sister-in-law of Septimius Severus. She played a central role in elevating her grandsons Elagabalus and later Alexander Severus to power. Elagabalus shocked Rome with his devotion to the Eastern sun god whose name he bore, attempting to elevate this cult above traditional Roman religion. His reported effeminacy, including claims that he married a male charioteer, further alienated Roman elites. After 4 years, the Praetorians murdered him and threw his body into the Tiber. Alexander Severus, only 13 when he became emperor, ruled under the guidance of his mother, Julia Mamaea. His 13-year reign sought to repair relations with the Senate and restore traditional values. But Rome now faced mounting military challenges. In the east, the newly established Sassanid Persian dynasty replaced the Parthians and posed a stronger threat, while Germanic tribes increased pressure on the Rhine and Danube. When Alexander chose negotiation over war with Germanic forces, his troops mutinied and declared Maximinus Thrax emperor. Maximinus, a towering former shepherd from Thrace, represented a new kind of emperor, a soldier from humble origins who rose solely through military skill. Though an effective general, his harsh taxation to fund wars made him deeply unpopular. The Senate, desperate to regain influence, backed a revolt led by the elderly governor Gordian and his son in Africa. When they were quickly defeated, the Senate appointed 2 of their own members, Popinus and Balbinus, as co-emperors. Maximinus marched on Italy but was killed by his own troops during the siege of Aquileia. The Senate's co-emperors were soon killed by the Praetorians, who then proclaimed Gordian III, just 13 years old, as emperor. This dizzying cycle of emperors and usurpers marked the beginning of what historians call the crisis of the 3rd century. In the decades that followed, at least 26 men claimed the imperial throne, most ruling only a few years before meeting violent deaths. The empire seemed to be unraveling as the imperial title became the prize in a destructive military lottery. External pressures worsened the chaos. Emperor Decius and his son died fighting the Goths at Abritus, the first Roman emperors killed in battle by foreign enemies. Emperor Valerian suffered an even worse fate, captured alive by the Sassanid king Shapur the first humiliated, and allegedly used as a human footstool before being flayed and stuffed as a trophy dot as central authority collapsed. The empire fractured. In the West, the Gallic Empire, including Gaul, Britain, and parts of Spain, broke away under local rulers. In the East, the desert city of Palmyra, under Queen Zenobia, seized control of territories from Egypt to Asia Minor. Meanwhile, constant debasement of currency to pay the armies triggered rampant inflation. Rome's thousand-year dominance appeared on the verge of collapse. Yet, even in this darkest hour, resilience and capable leadership prevented the empire's fall. A turning point came with Claudius II Gothicus. In a brief 2-year reign, he decisively defeated the Goths in the Balkans, earning the title Gothicus. Though he soon died of plague, his work was carried on by Aurelian, acclaimed emperor by the troops. Aurelian's 5-year reign earned him the title Restorer of the World. He crushed the Palmyrene Empire, parading Queen Zenobia in chains through Rome, and restored the breakaway Gallic provinces, reunifying the empire. To defend Rome from barbarian raids, he built massive new defensive walls, still partly standing today. He also reformed the currency and established the official sun cult to promote religious unity. Aurelian was assassinated in a plot triggered by false accusations, but his legacy was immense. Several short-lived emperors followed until Carus created a brief dynasty. While campaigning against Persia, he died either struck by lightning or assassinated. His son Numerian was later killed by his Praetorian prefect Aper. At Numerian's funeral, the soldiers proclaimed Diocletian, a cavalry commander of humble Dalmatian origin, as emperor. Diocletian personally executed Aper, fulfilling a prophecy that he would become ruler after slaying the boar Aper in Latin. With Diocletian's rise, the crisis period ended. The empire survived, but it was forever transformed. The old Augustan system, balancing republican traditions with imperial authority, had given way to an openly autocratic model. The emperor was now seen as a distant, sacred figure rather than first among equals. Military needs dominated governance, with the army nearly doubled in size to meet frontier threats, consuming vast resources. Taxes grew heavier and more organized to sustain these forces. The distinction between Italy and the provinces disappeared as the entire empire bore equal burdens. Despite turmoil, cultural life persisted. Neoplatonism flourished under thinkers like Plotinus, influencing Christian philosophy. Christianity itself expanded, offering hope and community in uncertain times. Roman law continued to develop under jurists such as Ulpian and Papinian, shaping future civilizations. Engineering achievements also continued, from Aurelian's walls to provincial public works. By the end of the 3rd century, the empire Diocletian inherited was battered but not broken. His coming reforms would reshape Roman governance, creating a new imperial system able to face a changing world. The transformation from the early empire of Augustus to the late Roman state was complete, a new order forged in the crucible of crisis and recovery. Victorious after securing the purple, the Roman world was left drained from half a century of turmoil. Drawing lessons from this crisis, the new emperor reshaped imperial governance more radically than anyone since Augustus. Born to a modest family in Dalmatia on the Adriatic coast, Diocletian rose through military service without aristocratic ties. This outsider's perspective may have given him clearer insight into Rome's systemic problems. The empire had grown too vast and complex for one ruler to govern effectively. Emergencies on one frontier often required the emperor's presence, just as new crises broke out elsewhere. Recognizing this reality, Diocletian made the unprecedented move of appointing a co-emperor. He elevated his fellow officer Maximian to Augustus, granting him responsibility for the western provinces, while Diocletian focused on the east. Even this division proved inadequate, so Diocletian expanded the imperial college by appointing 2 junior emperors, or Caesars Galerius in the east and Constantius Chlorus in the west. This arrangement, known as the Tetrarchy or Rule of 4, divided administrative duties while maintaining the appearance of a unified empire. Each tetrarch ruled a quarter of Roman territory from his own capital, as Rome itself lost central importance. The plan also established an orderly system of succession. After 20 years, the senior Augusti would retire, allowing the Caesars to rise and appoint new juniors. This mechanism sought to end the succession crisis that had destabilized the 3rd century. Beyond reforming leadership, Diocletian reorganized the empire's administrative geography. Provinces were divided into smaller units, nearly doubling their number, but making them easier to govern. These provinces were grouped into 12 dioceses, which were in turn organized into 4 prefectures aligned with each tetrarch's territory. This multi-layered system created stronger oversight to reduce corruption and improve efficiency. The military also underwent major reform. Diocletian separated civil and military authority, which had traditionally been combined under governors. He significantly expanded the army to address multiple frontier threats at once. To limit the power of ambitious generals, he reduced the size of provincial armies while creating a central mobile reserve capable of responding to crises. Supporting these larger structures required greater resources. Diocletian implemented a comprehensive census to assess taxable wealth and individuals. His tax system demanded payment in kind produce and goods, instead of increasingly worthless currency, with fixed quotas from each region. To ensure essential services, he bound certain professions to hereditary status, requiring sons to follow their father's trades. These reforms stabilized the empire, but increased state control over private life. The free market economy of earlier centuries shifted toward regulation, where the needs of the state outweighed private initiative. Social divisions sharpened, with separate legal standards for the honestiores and hum ors to address inflation. Diocletian issued his famous edict on maximum prices, setting ceilings on thousands of goods and services. However, the law proved unenforceable and was soon abandoned. In religious matters, Diocletian was initially tolerant, but later launched the Great Persecution against Christians. This final and most severe campaign involved the destruction of churches, confiscation of scriptures, and execution of clergy. Yet the persecution varied across the empire and ultimately failed to halt Christianity's growth. Sticking to his succession plan, Diocletian did what no emperor before him had done. He voluntarily retired, compelling Maximian to do the same. He spent his remaining years at his palace in Split on the Dalmatian coast, famously telling visitors that only someone who had been emperor could appreciate the peace of retirement, but his carefully crafted system collapsed almost immediately. Dynastic loyalty undermined the design, as troops proclaimed Constantine, son of Constantius Chlorus, and Maxentius, son of Maximian, as emperors. Years of civil war followed, ending with Constantine's victory. According to Christian tradition, before the decisive battle of the Milvian Bridge against Maxentius, Constantine saw a vision of a cross in the sky with the words, "In this sign, conquer." Whether a true conversion or political strategy, Constantine's embrace of Christianity transformed the Roman world. With his colleague Licinius, he issued the Edict of Milan, ending the persecution of Christians and restoring their property. While it did not make Christianity the state religion, it granted legal recognition and imperial support. Constantine later defeated Licinius to become sole ruler of a reunited empire. Perhaps his most consequential act was founding a new capital at Byzantium, dedicated as Constantinople. Its strategic location controlled the straits between Europe and Asia. This Christian city, free of Rome's pagan associations, became the imperial capital for over 1,000 years, Constantine preserved many of Diocletian's reforms while softening their harshest aspects. He introduced a new gold currency, the solidus, which retained its value for centuries and brought monetary stability after decades of inflation. His religious policies favored Christians without directly suppressing traditional worship, beginning a gradual transition that accelerated under his successors. After Constantine's death, the empire passed to his three sons Constantine II, Constantius II, and Constans. Their reigns were marked by internal conflict and religious disputes, especially over Arianism and the nature of Christ's divinity. Constantius II eventually ruled alone until his death. The brief reign of Julian, later called the Apostate, marked the last serious effort to restore traditional Roman religion. Raised Christian but privately pagan, Julian sought to revive classical culture and reduce Christian influence during his 18 months in power. His death in battle against the Persians ended this counter-movement. Later emperors maintained Christianity's privileged status. Under Theodosius I, Christianity became the official religion of the empire. The Edict of Thessalonica made Nicene Christianity the sole legitimate faith, while pagan temples were closed and sacrifices banned. Rome's ancient religious traditions were formally abandoned. Theodosius also faced grave military challenges. His predecessor Valens had suffered a catastrophic defeat at Adrianople against the Goths, with much of the Eastern army destroyed. Rather than expel them, Theodosius resettled the Goths as federates within the empire, autonomous allies under their own leaders, but subject to Rome. This provided manpower, but increased the influence of semi-independent Germanic groups within Roman borders. The late Roman army relied heavily on such allied contingents and recruited many Germanic soldiers into regular units. Though Romans still served in large numbers, and many barbarians were thoroughly Romanized, the army's composition changed significantly from earlier centuries. Social and cultural life also shifted. Christianity reshaped values, emphasizing salvation over civic duty. Cities shrank behind defensive walls. Monuments were dismantled for building materials or converted to Christian use. And the urban middle class declined as imperial service and large estates dominated economic life. Yet cultural creativity continued. The period saw great theological works by Ambrose, Jerome, and Augustine, shaping Western thought for centuries. Legally, the Theodosian Code compiled imperial laws, preserving Roman jurisprudence for the future. Upon Theodosius's death, the empire was divided between his sons Arcadius in the east and Honorius in the west. Though meant as temporary, the split became permanent. The eastern half, wealthier and geographically safer, endured for another 1,000 years as the Byzantine Empire, while the western half collapsed within a century by the end of the 4th century. Rome had changed profoundly. The emperor now ruled as a distant monarch, addressed as dominus rather than princeps. Court rituals emphasized imperial seclusion. Christianity displaced traditional religion, reshaping society and human purpose. Yet continuities remained. Rome still held much of its old territory. Latin and Greek remained official languages. Roman law governed daily life, and people still called themselves Romans, even as that identity evolved. The stage was now set for the Western Empire's final decline. As Germanic pressure mounted and resources dwindled, its emperors faced challenges they could no longer overcome. The coming century would witness the end of Roman rule in the West, even as the East endured at the dawn of the new century. The Roman Empire was divided between the sons of Theodosius. While it was technically still one empire, Arcadius in Constantinople and Honorius in Milan governed increasingly separate domains. Both young emperors depended heavily on their advisors, Rufinus in the east and Stilicho in the west. This dependence on court politics weakened imperial authority at the very moment. Rome faced one of its greatest challenges. The crisis began with the arrival of the Huns from the Eurasian steppe. Their migration westward pushed Germanic tribes against, and eventually across, Roman frontiers in unprecedented numbers. The most immediate danger came from the Goths, who, after the death of their leader Fritigern, united under a new and ambitious king, Alaric. Having lived within the empire as federates since their victory at Adrianople, the Goths believed they were mistreated by Roman officials. When their demands for better treatment were ignored, they rebelled and moved through the Balkans, at times negotiating, and at other times threatening both imperial courts. Stilicho, though of partial Vandal descent, was Romang in both culture and loyalty. He handled the Gothic problem with a mix of military action and diplomacy. Yet his efforts were undermined by mutual suspicion between the Eastern and Western courts, both fearing he aimed to dominate the empire as a whole. His eventual execution on charges of treason left the West without its most capable general. Seizing the opportunity, Alaric invaded Italy and achieved what had not occurred in 8 centuries, the sack of Rome. Although the Goths occupied the city for only 3 days and caused limited damage, the psychological blow to the Roman world was severe. Jerome in Bethlehem wrote that the light of the world was extinguished, and the whole world perished in one city. Alaric died soon after, and the Goths moved into Gaul before finally settling in Aquitaine as federates of Rome. Meanwhile, during a particularly harsh winter, other Germanic groups crossed the frozen Rhine into Gaul and later into Spain. These included the Vandals, Suebi, and Alans, who established their own territories within what were still nominally Roman provinces. The Western government, now based in Ravenna for its security, struggled to respond. Real authority, increasingly, rested with the Magister Militum, the supreme commander of the army, rather than the emperor. For nearly 20 years, this role was held by Flavius Aetius, often called the last of the Romans. While Aetius worked to preserve Romang rule in Gaul, a new threat arose in North Africa. The Vandals, led by their king Gaiseric, crossed from Spain and seized the rich provinces of Africa. By capturing Carthage, they not only cut Rome off from its main grain supply, but also built a fleet that dominated the western Mediterranean dot at the same time. The Huns emerged as the most dangerous opponent. Having already devastated the eastern provinces, Attila turned westward and invaded Gaul. Aetius assembled a coalition of Roman troops and Germanic allies, including the Visigoths, to face him. At the Battle of the Catalaunian Plains, this combined force managed to halt Attila's advance. The following year, he invaded Italy itself, and Rome appeared doomed. Yet an embassy led by Pope Leo I convinced Attila to withdraw. While later, accounts credited divine intervention, practical reasons such as disease, famine, and possible payments from Constantinople were likely factors. Attila's death soon afterward and the collapse of Hunnic power provided only a short reprieve. That same year, Emperor Valentinian III murdered Aetius, removing Rome's strongest defender. Soon after, Valentinian himself was killed by Aetius's supporters, ending the Theodosian dynasty in the west. What followed was a rapid succession of emperors, most of them controlled by powerful generals. Majorian briefly offered hope of revival, attempting to rebuild the military and reclaim Africa from the Vandals. Yet his defeat and execution marked the last serious effort to restore Rome's power in the West Dot after Majorian. Western emperors ruled little more than Italy. Other provinces fell under independent Germanic kingdoms: the Suebi in northwestern Spain, the Visigoths in Aquitaine and expanding into Gaul, the Burgundians in the southeast, and the Franks in the north. Britain, abandoned by Rome decades earlier, developed its own post-Roman society, shaped by Saxon settlers. by the late 5th century. The Western emperors were irrelevant to most of their former lands. Real power in Italy rested with generals such as Ricimer, Gundobad, and eventually Orestes. Orestes placed his young son Romulus on the throne, though the boy held no real authority. When Orestes refused demands from Germanic troops for land, they turned to Odoacer, a German officer in Roman service. Odoacer deposed Romulus and ended imperial rule in the West. Instead of claiming the title of emperor, Odoacer sent the imperial regalia to Emperor Zeno in Constantinople, declaring that a separate Western emperor was unnecessary. Zeno granted him the title of patrician, making him, at least in name, the emperor's representative, though he effectively ruled as king. Romulus, still a teenager, was allowed to retire to an estate with a pension as surprisingly merciful. And for a deposed ruler, this event is traditionally marked as the fall of the Western Roman Empire. Yet for contemporaries, there was no sudden collapse. Many Roman institutions continued under new rulers. Germanic kings issued laws modeled on Roman codes, collected taxes, and employed Roman officials. Latin remained the language of administration. The Catholic Church preserved Roman organization and law. Aqueducts still functioned, and cities continued to host forums, even if now under Germanic lords. The Western Empire's fall can be traced to several disadvantages. Its long and vulnerable land frontiers exposed it to repeated invasions. Its economy was less urban and more dependent on agriculture than the East. Crucial provinces such as Africa and Gaul, once the backbone of its finances, were lost to the Vandals and Visigoths, causing further decline. Frequent civil wars and rapid turnover of emperors weakened legitimacy. The sack of Rome itself also undermined the belief in Rome's eternal destiny. Yet Roman identity did not vanish. In the East, the empire thrived, with Constantinople as its capital. Emperors like Zeno considered themselves rulers of the whole Roman world and aspired to recover the lost West. In Italy, Odoacer's reign was short-lived, as Zeno authorized Theodoric, king of the Ostrogoths, to invade. Theodoric defeated and killed Odoacer, establishing a kingdom that blended Roman and Germanic traditions. As Western provinces transitioned into early medieval Europe, the Roman idea endured. Germanic kings sought recognition from Constantinople and valued Roman titles. The church filled the administrative void left by the empire. Meanwhile, in the East, the Roman state, Greek-speaking, Christian, but still calling itself Roman, continued to preserve the legacy of Augustus and Constantine. The fall of the Western Empire, therefore, was not a sudden disaster, but a transformation. The system created by Augustus after 5 centuries had failed in the West, yet Roman civilization itself adapted and lived on, flowing into new forms that shaped the medieval world to come. The eastern half of the Roman Empire endured, though. Its people never called themselves Byzantine, a label given much later by historians. They proudly identified as Romans, Romaioi, in their increasingly Greek tongue, and saw themselves as the rightful heirs of Caesar and Constantine. For nearly 1,000 years after the fall of Romulus Augustulus, this Eastern Roman Empire safeguarded and reshaped Rome's legacy. By the late 5th century, Emperor Zeno faced mounting challenges. Debates over Christ's nature divided Christians, while his Isaurian countrymen dominated the court, causing resentment in Constantinople. Yet the empire held strong through organized taxation, effective governance, and military security advantages the fractured West could no longer match. Zeno's successor, Anastasius, ruled capably for 27 years. His careful financial management rebuilt the treasury, and his construction of the long walls fortified Constantinople's land defenses. Despite continued religious tensions, he successfully preserved stability against Persia, the empire's longtime rival. The empire's golden age began under Justinian I, born to Latin-speaking peasants in the Balkans. He married Theodora, a former actress whose controversial rise to empress scandalized many, but brought him a capable and determined partner. Justinian's vision was the restoration of Rome's unity. He sent his gifted general Belisarius to reclaim North Africa from the Vandals, a campaign achieved with speed and success, restoring the vital grain-rich province. Encouraged, Justinian turned to Italy. What was meant to be a swift reconquest became a 20-year struggle, devastating the region. Although Ravenna fell and the Goths were defeated, Italy was left in ruins. Parts of Spain were also regained, yet full Western recovery remained beyond reach. These campaigns strained imperial resources already pressured by war with Persia. Matters worsened when the bubonic plague struck Constantinople, killing perhaps 40% of its people and spreading across the Mediterranean. The sharp loss of population weakened revenues and recruitment, leaving long-lasting challenges. Still, Justinian's reign produced enduring achievements. The Hagia Sophia, with its immense dome spanning 108 feet, became one of the world's great architectural wonders. Even more influential was the Corpus Juris Civilis, a codification of Roman law that shaped European legal systems for centuries and remains one of Rome's greatest legacies. After Justinian's death, the empire entered turbulence. Justin II lost most of Italy to the Lombards, while wars with Persia sapped resources. Later emperors Tiberius II and Maurus defended the frontiers but struggled with shortages. Maurice's military reforms led to his overthrow by Phocas, whose rule deepened instability. The 7th century brought an even greater crisis. Persia's Shah Khosrow II invaded, capturing Syria, Palestine, Egypt, and much of Anatolia. Jerusalem fell, and the relic of the true cross was seized. Persian forces even reached the Bosporus opposite Constantinople. In this desperate moment, Heraclius rose to power. He personally led daring campaigns deep into Persian lands, forcing peace that restored lost provinces and returned the true cross. It seemed Rome's eastern frontier was secure, but a new force soon appeared. From Arabia, the followers of Muhammad, united under Islam, surged outward. The weakened Persians collapsed, while Rome's armies suffered a crushing defeat at Yarmouk. Within a decade, Syria, Palestine, and Egypt long-standing Roman provinces were lost to Islamic rule. This collapse transformed the empire, shrinking it into a more compact realm centered on Constantinople, Asia Minor, and the Balkans. Greek replaced Latin in administration, and the empire adopted a more explicitly Christian identity. Many historians see this as the birth of Byzantium, though contemporaries still called themselves Romans. Despite these territorial losses, the empire adapted. The themed system, which organized provinces into military districts where soldiers defended their own farms, proved effective against raids. The invention of Greek fire, a secret incendiary weapon that could burn even on water, gave the navy a decisive advantage. Twice, Arab forces besieged Constantinople, and both times the city's massive defenses held, ensuring the empire's survival and preserving Europe from further conquest. The 8th and 9th centuries saw fierce disputes over religious images, known as the iconoclast controversy. Emperors from Leo III to Theophilos banned the veneration of icons, equating it with idolatry. This policy divided society and strained ties with the West. The eventual restoration of icons healed divisions and led to a revival of learning and culture under the Macedonian dynasty. Basil I founded this line, ushering in an era of recovery. Agriculture grew, cities thrived, and the military regained strength. Leaders such as Nicephorus Phocas and John Zimisces reclaimed territory in Syria, while Basil II, remembered as the Bulgar Slayer, secured dominance in the Balkans. At its height, this Greek-speaking empire was the wealthiest, most advanced Christian state. Constantinople, with perhaps 500,000 residents, towered over the small towns of Western Europe. Its marketplaces offered goods from China to Scandinavia. Its churches glittered with mosaics, and its scholars preserved classical knowledge. Yet beneath this prosperity lay weakness. Free peasants, once the backbone of the armies, lost land to powerful aristocrats. Bureaucratic posts became hereditary. Religious divisions with Rome deepened, culminating in the Great Schism between Catholic and Orthodox Christianity. Disaster struck in 1071 at Manzikert, where the Seljuk Turks defeated Emperor Romanos IV, opening Anatolia to Turkish settlement. Normans seized the empire's last holdings in Italy, while Pechenegs raided across the Danube. The once resurgent empire now struggled to survive. Emperor Alexios, the first Komnenos, appealed to the West, sparking the First Crusade. While Crusaders established states in the Holy Land, tensions between Latins and Greeks grew, climaxing in 1204 when the Fourth Crusade sacked Constantinople itself. A Latin empire briefly replaced Roman rule, but Michael VIII Palaiologos restored the city decades later. Even so, the empire was only a fragment of its former self. Italian merchants dominated its economy, Balkan neighbors eroded its borders, and Turkish emirates seized Anatolia. Among them, the Ottomans rose as the greatest threat. Crossing into Europe, the Ottomans steadily surrounded Constantinople. Appeals for Western aid brought little. In 1453, Sultan Mehmed II launched his final siege. For 7 weeks, Constantinople's ancient walls resisted cannon fire, but on May 29th, the city fell. Emperor Constantine XI fought and died with his soldiers as the Ottomans entered. Hagia Sophia was converted into a mosque the same day. The Roman Empire, lasting 1,480 years from Augustus to Constantine XI, had ended, yet its legacy endured. Ottoman sultans claimed the Roman title. Moscow styled itself the Third Rome, preserving Orthodox tradition. Renaissance Italy rediscovered classical texts preserved by Byzantine scholars who fled west. Most importantly, Byzantium had acted as a bridge between antiquity and the medieval world, protecting Roman law, Greek philosophy, and Christian theology when they might otherwise have been lost. Its diplomacy, bureaucracy, and economy influenced regions far beyond its borders. The saga that began with Romulus on the Palatine Hill had reached its conclusion. But Rome itself never truly disappeared, transformed. As you drift toward rest, imagine the echoes of its civilization in our laws, our languages, our architecture, and countless aspects of daily life that would be unthinkable without the enduring legacy of Rome. In 1453, Rome's influence still echoed through the centuries, shaping the world we live in today. As you prepare for rest, let us reflect on the lasting legacy of this extraordinary civilization that left its mark in countless ways. One of Rome's most important contributions lies in law and governance. The Romans created an advanced legal system that went far beyond earlier codes, designed to address the needs of a diverse and complex society. Concepts we now consider fundamental: the presumption of innocence, the role of intent in criminal acts, and the distinction between civil and criminal law, all trace back to Roman innovation. Justinian's great legal compilation, the Corpus Juris Civilis, preserved these ideas through the Middle Ages and into the modern era. When European nations developed their legal frameworks, they relied heavily on this Roman inheritance. Today, the civil law tradition governing much of Europe, Latin America, and parts of Africa and Asia comes directly from Roman models. Even the English common law system, though developed independently, absorbed many Roman principles. Rome's impact extended beyond laws to public administration. They built a professional civil service, maintained systematic records, created standardized weights and measures, conducted regular censuses, and developed sophisticated tax systems. While these details may seem ordinary, they formed the foundation that allowed complex societies to function effectively. The concept of citizenship as a legal status with rights and responsibilities also stems largely from Rome. By gradually extending citizenship to conquered peoples, the Romans offered integration into their empire, an approach very different from the strict exclusivity of many other ancient states. Language and literature were equally transformed. Latin, once spoken by farmers along the Tiber, became the common language of Western civilization for more than 1,000 years. Though it is no longer a native language, Latin's descendants, the Romance languages such as Spanish, Portuguese, French, Italian, and Romanian, are spoken by nearly 1 billion people today. Even English, though Germanic at its core, draws around 60% of its vocabulary from Latin, often through French. Scientific, legal, and technical terminology around the world remains heavily Latin-based, providing a shared vocabulary across cultures. Roman literature also set standards that shaped the Western tradition. Virgil's Aeneid influenced poets, from Dante to Milton. Ovid's Metamorphoses inspired Shakespeare and many others. Cicero's oratory defined models of political speech, while Seneca's philosophy and tragedies shaped Renaissance drama. Works by Pliny and Tacitus established ways of writing history and letters that still guide how we understand those genres today. Rome's physical legacy remains striking. Roman engineering transformed the Mediterranean world with infrastructure on a massive scale. Many Roman roads still serve as the base for modern highways. Aqueducts continued to supply water to cities well into the modern era. Roman innovations in architecture, especially their use of arches, vaults, domes, and concrete, allowed them to build structures that have lasted for centuries. The Pantheon, with its perfect dome and open oculus, remains one of the most admired buildings in the world, inspiring architects for generations. In military affairs, Rome left a powerful model. The legion, flexible, professional, and supported by engineering and logistics, set standards for later armies. Their focus on discipline, training, and strategy proved more enduring than sheer numbers or bravery. To this day, military leaders study Caesar's campaigns for lessons in strategy and tactics. Rome's political legacy is more complex. The Republic, with its checks and balances, separation of powers, and term limits, deeply influenced modern constitutions, including that of the United States. Yet Rome also revealed how these systems could be undermined by ambition and how freedom could be traded for security. The empire that replaced the Republic offered both benefits and risks. At its best, stability and prosperity. At its worst, corruption, oppression, and the difficulties of holding vast, diverse territories together. Christianity, the world's largest religion, also spread through a Roman context. Early Christians used Roman roads, ships, and cities to spread their message. After Constantine's conversion, the imperial administration provided a framework for the church's organization, with dioceses often matching Roman provinces. Even the title Pontifex Maximus, once held by Roman emperors, was adopted by the popes. Rome's cultural strength lay not only in original achievements, but in its ability to preserve and transmit the wisdom of others. Roman thinkers and artists borrowed heavily from the Greeks, but by doing so, they safeguarded Greek knowledge for future generations. Without Rome, much of classical thought might have been lost. The idea of Rome itself became a powerful symbol long after the empire's fall. Leaders across Europe, from Charlemagne to the Byzantine emperors, from the Russian Tsars to the Holy Roman emperors, claimed Rome's mantle. Even in the 20th century, Regimes like Nazi Germany and Mussolini's Italy borrowed Roman imagery to project power, showing how enduring its symbolism remains. Most importantly, Rome offered a vision of a cosmopolitan world, different peoples united under shared laws and citizenship, while still keeping aspects of their identity. Though imperfect in practice, this idea of common belonging remains highly relevant in today's interconnected world. Rome also showed the extremes of human nature, the wisdom of Marcus Aurelius, alongside the excesses of Caligula, the brilliance of the Pantheon alongside the cruelty of gladiatorial games. Its legacy reminds us that civilization always carries both achievements and flaws. As you drift towards sleep, imagine how different the world would be without Rome's enduring influence. Our laws, languages, architecture, politics, and religions would be profoundly different. From the names of our months to the foundations of citizenship and governance, Rome continues to shape how we understand ourselves. The story of Rome, spanning over 2 millennia, from Romulus to the fall of Constantinople, is a vast narrative of human resilience and adaptation. Even after the empire fell, its shadow continued to shape history. And as you rest beneath the same stars that once shone over Augustus, remember that the hopes, fears, and dreams that motivated the Romans are the same ones we carry today. Perhaps in that shared humanity lies Rome's most lasting legacy.